I'd now like to spend some time explaining the difference between Office 365 and Microsoft 365. So you kind of have to go through a little bit of a history lesson to understand why things are the way they are. Think as in the beginning of the cloud services for Microsoft, they created Azure, and Azure was Microsoft's main infrastructure as a service concept for controlling things like virtual machines and deploying virtual machines out to the cloud and all of that. And of course, as you are probably aware, Microsoft has had Office for decades now. And of course, they wanted to offer Office as a software as a service concept. Of course, the admin side of Office 365 is actually a platform as a service, but the front end of it, which is what your users are dealing with, is a software as a service. The concept, though, the idea was, okay, Office 365 will be another type of cloud platform that links back to Azure. Microsoft came out with Azure AD, which Microsoft is now calling Intra ID. But that was the identification services and the account management and all of that for where you'd store your user accounts. And so even though you had Azure kind of in the foundation of all of this, and you had Office 365 that kind of sat on top of it. That was sort of the idea with Azure AD, was that was their directory services for storing user accounts and all that. Well, then as time has gone on, they started selling Office 365 licenses and all that. People started getting confused on what's the difference between just regular Office 365 apps versus the Office 365 platform. And so there was a difference, or I should say there is a difference there, and the Office 365 platform is more of a platform as a service for admins to control and deploy the Office apps out there and give permissions to users, and then the Office 365 apps themselves are more software as a service that users get access to the software apps. This got very, very confusing to people. So then what happened was, a few years ago, Microsoft decided to change the name of the Office 365 platform to Microsoft 365. Microsoft 365 being, this is where administrators can manage everything and deploy their apps, and they condensed Office into the normal Office apps. Well, then as they started creating other applications to support all of this, like Microsoft Viva, you had the operating systems now that are offered as a service. Things got expanded. In other words, take Windows, for example. Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 12. All these operating systems are offered as a service, and they wanted to license those out. So what happened was they went with the term Microsoft 365 for licensing out the operating systems as well. So what happens is you're left with an older style licensing model and the newer style licensing model. The older style being Office 365, the newer style being Microsoft 365. So Office 365 old, Microsoft 365 the new. If you actually go out and do a search, let's say Google will say Microsoft, will say Office 365 versus Microsoft 365. All right. If you go right here, it says, what is the difference between Office 365, Microsoft 365? There are articles where people are talking about this, and people are basically explaining the same thing I'm explaining here, which is, with Office 365, you're going to get, you don't get the operating systems and all that included. It doesn't come with things like Microsoft Viva, all the Viva capabilities. Some of the Office licenses do come with a little bit of the Viva apps, but you're missing some key ingredients, and I'm going to break it all down for you. I'm going to make it very clear for you in just a second, so just keep listening to me here. But if you actually do a search for Office 365 licenses, I want to show you something that sort of gives you a telltale sign of things to come. So I just searched for Office 365 licenses, but look, compare all Microsoft 365 plans, formerly Office 365. So they are now trying to condense everything down to Microsoft 365 plans. They're no longer pushing Office 365 subscriptions anymore. Now, this is where I'm going to really, really break it down for you. And you can do this exact same experiment in your own environment. If we go to portal.microsoft.com, and we go to the marketplace, all right, once we get in the marketplace, we'll go to all products, okay, and we're going to click on Microsoft 365 and Office 365. We're going to turn off recommended, so we're just going to show those licenses. So if we do the equivalent, so we're going to do the equivalent of Office 365 E5, and the equivalent of that would be Microsoft 365 E5. So we'll say compare, and then we're going to find Microsoft 365 E5. So let's go to, there it is right there. So compare, you'll see number one, it's $57 for Microsoft 365 E5. You'll see that Office 365 E5 is $38, so it's a lot cheaper. Now if we go up here and we click to compare, okay, you're going to have Office 365 on the left, E5 on the left, Microsoft 365 E5 on the right. Notice it's more expensive. Okay, so compare them. So pretty much it starts out the same, right? So Office 365 E5, Microsoft 365 E5, they all have the same licenses available. But if we look, this is where things change. Office 365 E5 does not give you the Premium 2 version of Azure AD. Again, this is now name changing to Intra ID. Microsoft Intune. Look at that. Cloud App Security. Okay. Azure Information Protection. You do get Cloud App Security for E5. Azure Rights Management, you do get that. You don't get the Advanced Threat Protection with E5, Office 365 E5. You don't get the operating system licenses with Office 365 E5. Okay? A lot of this stuff you get. Yeah, so the big things is you don't get the operating system licenses. Okay? You don't get, and you definitely don't get the full multi-factor authentication, the premium version of Azure AD, Intune, which is a big deal. I would say, to me, the biggest things you don't get is Intune, which is extremely powerful. You don't get the operating system stuff, and you know, you're missing the full multi-factor authentication. You're missing threat protection. So those are some of the big things that you don't get with Office 365 E5. So hopefully that clears that up for you. Again, you can do that little experiment yourself. Go in your own environment, portal.microsoft.com, go to Marketplace, do the search like I showed you. And that way you can get a good visualization and get a little hands-on with just kind of understanding the differences.